This podcast is for educational purposes. Our guests aren't scripted and are free to speak their minds. Therefore, their views and opinions don't necessarily reflect those of BridgeBio Pharma. Also, your doctor is your best source of information about any symptoms you might be experiencing. Please consult a medical care professional about any health questions and concerns. Now, we hope you enjoy the podcast.
Hi, and welcome to On Rare, a rare disease podcast produced by BridgeBio, a biotech company that works on developing treatments for rare diseases. At On Rare, we always explore what it's like to live with a rare disease. I'm your host, Mandy Rohrig, a member of the Patient Advocacy team, and I'm joined, as always, by my friend and colleague, David Rintell, head of Patient Advocacy at BridgeBio. Hi, David.
Hi, Mandy. Nice to see you. Nice to record another podcast with you. Today, we're going to be talking to Philip and Sally, a couple who've been married for 50 years, and they are living with Philip's ATTR amyloidosis.
I'm looking forward to learning from Philip and Sally also, but first we will hear a little bit about what ATTR is from our colleague, Dr. Adam Castaño.
Yes, I'm really happy to welcome Dr. Adam Castaño. Adam is the head of the amyloid prevention program at BridgeBio. Happy to have you, Adam.
Thank you, David. Pleasure to be here.
So let's start from the beginning. What is ATTR amyloidosis?
Sure. So ATTR stands for transthyretin amyloidosis. Transthyretin refers to a protein, abbreviated TTR, where the A stands for amyloidosis. And it refers to a disease that can lead to a host of systemic symptoms, ranging from heart failure to neuropathy to gastrointestinal issues, among other issues, and primarily is caused by the breakdown of protein, transthyretin, that TTR, that deposits into different organs and tissues around the body.
What does transthyretin do in the body?
Great question. So transthyretin is actually one of the most clever named proteins in the body. It actually tells you what it does in the way it's named. Trans means it's a transporter of thyroid and retinoic acid, so transthyretin. And it's been around for a very long time with respect to evolution. It's widely conserved among animal species with spine, so vertebrates. And we're increasingly learning that low levels of transthyretin in general populations might be associated with increased forms of heart failure.
Oh, that's really interesting. And most people develop ATTR amyloidosis a bit later in life. And I wonder if you could tell us, why do some people develop ATTR and others don't?
So great question. There's two main types of ATTR amyloidosis. The first is a hereditary form, which occurs essentially due to the presence of a mutation in the gene that encodes the TTR protein, which we call variant ATTR. And the second type is called wild type, which occurs essentially aging. There's no mutation present in the gene that encodes TTR. The real reasons for that form are not fully well understood at this point, but probably has to do with something about how the body regulates the turnover of amyloid, meaning our bodies typically sweep up amyloid that's made. We believe that we actually become more prone and inefficient at clearing forms of amyloid, which means that it accumulates more as we age and can lead to similar manifestations. Basically, in the hereditary form, one of these mutations can become unstable. As I used to tell my patients, transthyretin, when it's produced by the liver, it exists in the body like a four-leaf clover. It's something that exists in nature, and it's special in forms of four. It's naturally occurring. But when there's an inherited mutation, that four-leaf structure breaks apart, and those can actually become sticky. They clump together and form what we call amyloid plaques, right? And that's what the fundamental issue is in TTR amyloidosis, whether it's due to hereditary variants or the aging process itself. And those plaques are what then go on to deposit into various organs and tissues.
So people who have one of the genetic variants have it from birth, but it sounds like the protein doesn't start to misfold until adulthood or later adulthood.
That's right, David. They're born with the protein, but it really is something that accrues over time. After years and years of amyloid formation, it takes, we believe, decades, if you will, for that amyloid to actually lead to damage in the organs that it's affecting.
Very interesting.
Adam, quick question. So, the amyloid buildup that you talk about, many of us have heard of amyloid plaques in Alzheimer's disease and things
Right.
like that. Is this the same?
Yeah, great question. TTR amyloid is a form of amyloidosis, as is Alzheimer's, but they're different. There are many types of amyloidosis, and what defines each type is the specific protein that breaks apart. In Alzheimer's, it's a different type of protein that breaks apart and deposits primarily in the brain, leading to dementia. But TTR amyloid depositing into primarily the heart and the nerves.
Can you tell us about some of the other organs that it might deposit or have an impact?
Yeah, the heart and the nerves are the most common, if you will, but it can also deposit in the gastrointestinal tract, which can cause, some pretty debilitating symptoms, chronic alternating diarrhea and constipation, pain. And it can also deposit in joints and can lead to carpal tunnel syndrome or hip and knee issues, rupture of the biceps tendon, and another condition called spinal stenosis, which can occur in the cervical spine and the neck or in the lower back.
So we know in ATTR with cardiomyopathy that it causes heart failure due to the formation of amyloid plaques in the heart. But what is meant by heart failure, and what happens to someone when they do have an accumulation of the misfolded protein in their heart?
Sure. So when we talk about amyloid heart failure, which is abbreviated ATTR-CM, what happens is these amyloid plaques deposit in the heart muscle in between the cells, which leads the heart muscle over time to actually stiffen and become leathery. So if you imagine a balloon, when you blow it up, it's typically, nice and flexible. But if that were leather, like a baseball glove, it'd be really hard to blow air into and actually inflate. And so that's similar to what happens in the heart over time, is that it becomes stiff and its ability to pump blood becomes impaired. So it can neither receive blood from the rest of the body, nor can it pump blood efficiently to supply oxygen to the rest of the body. And that eventually leads patients to feel short of breath, fatigued, difficulty walking upstairs, or progressively having issues, going about their typical activities of daily living. And untreated really can lead to heart failure hospitalizations as well.
I'm just reflecting a bit about what you shared, Adam, and how it can affect all of these different organ systems. And what I find interesting is the symptoms that they might cause are also common with aging. So it makes me wonder if ATTR is underdiagnosed because they might be misdiagnosed with spinal stenosis, for example, or peripheral neuropathy of unknown origin.
Yeah, Mandy, you're touching on something really critical here, and that is that for the longest time, ATTR amyloidosis has been underdiagnosed and underrecognized. And unfortunately, when there's not a clear treatment for a disease, there's a sense of nihilism often within the medical community. Why diagnose something for which there was no treatment? It was also thought to be unbelievably rare for the longest time, and we're learning more and more now that it is not so rare. And the third reason really was that it used to be that the only way to diagnose it was with an invasive biopsy, typically of the heart, which may sound, scary, but we find ourselves really in a new era where we have increased awareness of the disease, primarily because there are now, for the first time ever, new treatments. And we've also discovered a new non-invasive way to diagnose the disease, where a bone scan, typically used for looking at infections or cancer, these scans can also pick up cardiac amyloid. It lights up on these bone scans. And that's really revolutionized our ability to diagnose the disease. New awareness of the disease among physicians, the new therapies to treat the disease, and a new non-invasive way to diagnose it. It is becoming more and more diagnosed.
Well, Adam, this has really been fascinating and really helps us prepare for our conversation with Philip and his wife, Sally. So thank you so much for joining us.
No, thank you, David. I could do this all day. I love to talk about amyloid and anytime.
Okay, any day.
Thanks, Adam.
I'm delighted to welcome Philip and Sally to the On Rare podcast. How are you doing, Philip? Sally?
Doing fine, thank you.
Same.
Good, great. Would you mind telling us a bit about yourselves?
Sure. So we're early 70s. We retired about 12 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
We live in Burlingame, California. Since retiring, we've done a lot of travel. That was sort of our big retirement plan. Our daughter lives in London and has been there for 10 years, and we enjoy visiting with her and her husband. And what else do you want to say about ourselves?
We met at Cal 50 years ago.
Oh, yeah. We did that.
We did that.
So we've been together a good long while.
Oh, wow.
And for those who do not live in California, Cal means University of California.
UC Berkeley. Go Bears.
So you were there during an interesting time.
Indeed. Indeed.
I would love to hear more about that sometime. So where does the story of ATTR begin for you? And maybe we should start by what was going on before anything happened that is connected to ATTR. Why don't you tell it?
Yes, so my first symptoms were GI problems, and we were away traveling. Well, began in February of 2017, and I started losing weight for unexplained reasons. And for 5 years, I was trying to get a diagnosis. Numerous doctors, numerous tests, all around the San Francisco Bay Area, and got nowhere. At the start, I was a normal 172 pounds. I'm 6 feet tall. At my worst, I continued losing weight until I was down to 112 pounds.
Oh, my.
Oh, my goodness. Can't imagine that.
A complete mystery still. My GP wrote to Mayo Clinic thinking they'll take me on as one of their mystery cases. They turned me down. They said, you have plenty of resources in the San Francisco Bay Area. You don't need us. By coincidence, I have a long-term, very good friend living in Los Angeles. I was talking to him about my problems. He had lived in Sydney, Australia, and got to know a GI doc. My friend discussed me with this doctor in Sydney and asked the doctor, who would you see if you were having all these symptoms? He suggested a doctor at Johns Hopkins University. I emailed him, and less than an hour and a half later, that doctor emailed me back, and he said, I have an idea about what he had me order some tests with some local Bay Area doctors, and he asked for special stains that none of the others had ever asked for before. And this stain is called
Congo Red.
Congo Red. I had amyloid deposits
Wow.
throughout my GI tract, and it was blocking nutrients from being absorbed in my system, thus the weight loss. He said, you need to be on IV nutrition immediately. I mean, I was on my last legs.
You were on death's door.
And had trouble in the Bay Area getting a doc to order the IV nutrition. They call it TPN. I'm not sure what that stands for. Total parental TPN. Finally got a doc to comply, and I got on the IV nutrition, and it was a lifesaver.
Yeah.
And I gained quite a bit of my weight back.
Sally, this must have been a really challenging period for you to see your husband of then almost 50 years wasting away and losing weight and, as you say, being at death's door.
That's an understatement. The thing that's frustrating in hindsight, but one of his doctors, a GI doctor, finally said, you know what, you really just need to see a psychiatrist. I still growl when I think about that doctor. The lack of curiosity, the lack of caring was shocking to us because he had all the classic symptoms that if somebody had just paid attention and connected the dots, he had bilateral carpal tunnel, he had it in his heart, he had it in his GI tract, and it was all there and apparent, and people just didn't connect the dots.
Yeah.
Who are some of the specialists that you saw during this period?
Starting with my GP, who referred me to a GI doc. And that GI doc ultimately referred me to the GI department at UC San Francisco. And they sent me to a motility expert at Cal Pacific Medical Center. Once diagnosed, I ended up with Stanford at their amyloidosis center. So I've had, a neurologist, again, a GI doc, cardiologist, and an endocrinologist.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow. So quite a few specialists that you saw.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I have a good team now.
Yeah, and grateful to the physician at Johns Hopkins for listening to you and coming up with some ideas.
It was incredible.
Did he ever say what was the clue for him that kind of tipped him off?
Guess that he'd seen it all before. What do you think?
I think it was the total combination of symptoms that Philip had were just classic. And he had seen amyloidosis before. So none of the other doctors that we saw out of the amyloid centers had seen these combinations before.
Yeah.
And he had an expertise in infiltration diseases. My GI tract was infiltrated with these amyloid proteins.
Wow. So you went to Johns Hopkins, which is in Baltimore. You saw the physician who had the ideas what it might be, and did that physician give you the diagnosis, or?
Yes, he did. He instructed my GI doc at Cal Pacific Medical Center to take specific biopsies and to send them off to,
ironically, the
Mayo Clinic and order Congo red stains on the biopsies. And so the results there showed amyloid deposits.
He had an hypothesis and asked your healthcare providers to have the right tests done. And the Congo red was analyzed at Mayo Clinic, who didn't want to see you in the first place.
It didn't want me in the first place. That's right.
And then who finally delivered the diagnosis to you?
My general practitioner, who really didn't know anything about it, and just told me it's very serious, it's fatal, and I need to get my affairs in order ASAP. So I left that office with that information.
Wow. Oh, goodness. Sally, I'm going to ask you again, just...
He's looking for tears, honey.
There were lots of tears. Lots of tears.
I imagine that's just awful to hear.
I start to cry just thinking about it now. Yeah, it was awful. And then having to break the news to our daughter and all of that.
Yeah.
But that's not what happened.
So what happened? Go on, Sally. Why don't you tell the next part, if you would?
So we were never going to go back to UCSF again. So we went to Stanford, and they knew right away. That's where you had the genetic test taken, right?
Yeah. And then they confirmed that it was hereditary amyloidosis. They told me it comes from my Irish ancestors. They told me what county in Ireland. And they told me how far back it goes. Mm-hmm. It's from an Irish king, King Galban, Galban, from the 5th century, County Donegal, way up north.
Your royalty.
Yes, this is insane. Coincidentally, my sister has the exact disease. She got the gene mutation as well. She was having symptoms before me. Same exact symptoms.
Oh, really?
She's going through her thing. I'm going through mine. But I had to call her and tell her the news because she was undiagnosed this whole time. Her response was, out of everything I told her, she said, "Oh, so we're related to royalty."
That was the take home.
That was the only thing she heard.
Is she over trying to get the keys to the castle is the question. That, I guess you could say that, seeing things on the bright side. So
Absolutely.
And anyone in your parents' generation or grandparents' generation, similar symptoms?
So, yeah, in retrospect, we realized that my mother had it.
Really?
In the end, she died from heart failure, and her half-brother also died from heart failure.
And your cousin on that side of the family has the gene but no symptoms.
Yeah, that's exactly right. My first cousin did the genetic test, has the mutation, but is asymptomatic.
But his brother does not have the gene.
My sister actually is worse off than me. Her heart was more affected than mine. So far, my heart is not terribly affected, just somewhat. She had to get a pacemaker. That's the first thing they did for her.
It seems as though your diagnosis has informed a lot of your family members. So you've really helped your family get on a better path.
Yeah, that's right. Definitely my sister, and then my cousin will be monitored. If symptoms develop, it'll jump on it with the meds that are available. For me, if I had had an earlier diagnosis, I wouldn't have the awful symptoms I do now. The neuropathy is awful. The autonomic system is off. I have a bit of a balance issue, and my feet are painful. My hands, I can't write my name barely with the neuropathy. And then, of course, the GI stuff has made me a prisoner for a number of years. I can't leave the house.
That's not the case now, though.
No.
Yeah.
So that's being well managed with the meds that I take.
Oh, good. So your GI symptoms started to resolve.
Not resolved, but they are holding them at bay. The problem is still there, but I've got ancient medicine called tincture of opium that causes the opposite of diarrhea. It causes constipation. But for me, I'm at a normal level, so that's been quite helpful.
But one of the cardiologists that Philip was sent to before he had a diagnosis.
Oh, right.
He had done, what test did he do, honey?
As a routine matter, before getting some diagnostics, they did a EKG, electrocardiogram, at UCSF. No one talked to me about the results from that. I started to look at all these tests, and I saw the report on that showed signs of a heart attack. My heart damage from the deposits are similar to the damage you would get from a heart attack. And nobody bothered to tell me, but I looked at it and I went to my general practitioner doc, and he said, well, it could be just the technician error. He ordered me to go to a cardiologist and have that redone. Same problem showed up. They did an echocardiogram, and he didn't see anything. He said, I need to eat a lot of potatoes, get some weight back on.
So we call him Dr. Potato.
And I don't remember his real name. We refer to him as Dr. Potato.
Dr. Potato.
I remember
that. But a year later, Philip had the same test done, and at that point he had a diagnosis. So Dr. Potato goes back and looks at the tests from the prior year and said, "Oh yeah, I see, it's all right here."
And he showed me all the spots where the deposits are from the first one he did.
But
and
he didn't know what he was looking for.
Didn't,
so that's the frustrating part, is there were so many people that missed the clear signs.
So I just want to make sure I understand. So there were deposits in your GI system resulting in the gastrointestinal issues that you had and the weight loss. And there are deposits in your nerves, and that results in the neuropathy and the issues that you have with your fine motor skills and your balance.
That's
and
right.
then the heart issues and the evidence of heart damage.
That's it, yeah.
Okay.
I'm so sorry that you went through this prolonged period seeing healthcare providers who were not able to understand what was happening to you, even when it was in front of them with the echo. We've heard this quite a bit before for people living not only with amyloidosis, but other rare conditions. Healthcare providers are looking for what the more common conditions are, and when they don't see it, they don't recognize it. The zebra has become a kind of graphic for rare diseases, because rather than when you hear hooves think of a horse, then maybe you should be thinking of the zebra. In other words, the outlier, so to speak.
But it does feel like, or seem like, there's more knowledge just in this amount of time. I always would read the diagnosis column in the New York Times, and there was one time when the mystery disease was amyloidosis. I almost started to cry thinking, oh my God, people know about this disease. Wow. And you now see commercials on television about it. So, these are good steps.
Yes. So because of the fact that I'm concrete and don't have any imagination, I want to make sure that we have the full story. And we started talking about how when you went to Stanford and went to an amyloidosis clinic, that the healthcare providers were much more familiar. If you don't mind, can we go back to what it was like when you arrived at Stanford and were started to see those healthcare providers?
So our first, when I say ours, I mean Sally and me, we always go to these appointments together. It's great to have a second pair of ears to hear what they're talking about. It's new terminology. It's all scary, and you just don't know if you're going to absorb it all. The first meeting was with the neurologist. He ordered some meds, and then he sent me to the cardiologist, who ordered a different medication for the deal with the heart. They were very informative and explained how a lot of this we're learning as we go. A wonderful feeling of relief when we leave those appointments.
Yeah.
Just like somebody knows what's what, and knowing that we had a resource to go to, and it was like we were embraced by a community of experts.
Yeah.
It was wonderful.
That sounds so different than your previous experience, and it's really a lovely sentiment to be embraced by a community of experts.
Yeah, I mean, wouldn't you agree? That's
Absolutely. Especially your GI doctor. I love him.
Be careful, Philip. Sally's in love with the GI doctor.
Listen for what nickname she might give him, right? We'll see if you give him a nickname that's not Dr. Potato.
If it's Dr. What was the one from not Dr. Dreamy?
Dr. McDreamy.
Oh,
yeah,
McDreamy.
If she starts calling him Dr. McDreamy, look out. Yeah.
But it sounds like a lot of the relief was that they knew what you were going through. They were not surprised. They were able to explain it to you, and they had some options about treatment.
That was it.
Yeah. They were calming. It was calming.
Yeah.
And was their explanation of ATTR what they said you should expect different than what you had heard before?
Well, yeah, I mean, it was explained pretty well. Just prior to that, I was told by my general practitioner to get my affairs in order. So quite a jump from that, and quite a relief.
Yeah.
To know that, there's meds out there, no cure yet, but at least keep me from getting worse.
Good. So that was how long ago that you went to Stanford?
January 11th, 2022.
That is amazing.
Like, how does she know? I don't know.
It was the first quarter of 2022. January 11th, 2022 is when he finally got on TPN.
2022. Wow. That's been about 3 years. What's life been like during the past 3 years? Bring us up to date.
Well, we got my weight back up. While on TPN, I would still eat regular food, but the real nutrients are from the IV nutrition. I went from 112 pounds, I got up to 150. And then they gave me permission to go off TPN. I was doing pretty well. And then we took a trip to England and visited our daughter. And that was, how many months was that?
You were on TPN for about 16 months, and it took you about 14 months to lose all that weight again. And he's back on TPN.
The other day, last night, time I weighed, I was 158. And that's a good weight. And I've been given permission to see my daughter again.
Oh, good.
So,
can they arrange for you to have TPN in the UK?
No. Well, I mean, it'd be quite complicated, I think.
But they've given him permission to go off for a couple of months and see how he does. He'll end up going back on again, but...
Yeah. And just so we understand and our listeners understand that, I think it's total...
It ends with nutrition.
Parenteral.
Yeah, total parenteral nutrition.
Parenteral.
Is because the plaques that are in your digestive system prevent you from absorbing the nutrients from your digestive system.
That's right.
But don't resolve that problem.
Right. We get those deposits out, and if my tissues can heal, I guess that would be a real game changer.
Yeah. Because not being able to get nutrition from the food that you eat and having to take it intravenously, that it's limiting during a time of life that your plans have been to travel. So
exactly, yeah. And it's a little risky. I did spend a week in the hospital. I got a blood infection.
Which is not uncommon.
Yeah, but it happens really fast, and you can just not recover if it goes untreated for just a few days.
But I just want to be very clear that this infection happened when the home health nurse was connecting him. It was not me.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Could you describe how TPN works?
So every week we get a delivery of these plastic bags that are filled with fluid. When I connect to it, it's for 12 hours. It's like in a little backpack that has a battery pump, and it slowly pumps that fluid directly into my blood system. It goes in
Through a catheter.
through a catheter that's in my chest. Most of the time I was doing it in the nighttime, so it would happen while I slept. Connect at 9 p.m. in the evening and then come off at 9 a.m. the following morning. But really getting awful sleep. Number one, the pump makes noise. Number two, I'm being pumped up with fluids during the night and I have to get up to pee, and then it's hard to get back to sleep. So I've switched recently to doing this in the daytime.
Really? Uh-huh.
The inconvenience of it's a necessary way, but not optimal.
And do you need to do this every day?
So currently I'm doing it 3 days a week.
Yeah.
I'm maintaining my weight, so that seems to be just right.
But you're tethered for 3 days a week during the day.
Right. But I'm already married.
Just, this is audio, and you didn't see Sally pushing Philip. And Sally, you play an active role by administering the TPN.
Yeah. And it's just on my part, it's just a lot of organization and keeping things in mind. I have to be aware when the compounding pharmacy calls to ask what my order should be for the week. I have to have looked at all of my supplies and know exactly what I need. I need to remember to pull the bag out of the refrigerator a couple of hours before I connect them, because that's required. And then just the physical, I was scared to death when I first started doing it. Now I can do it blindfolded. It's no big deal.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think we know that condition like ATTR affects not just the patient, but their family. And this is a really good example of that. You, Sally, are very involved.
Yeah, I don't know how people do it without a helper. I mean, to go to the doctors, I'm on volume 8 of his health journal. I keep track of everything, what he eats, how he's feeling every day. Just because you see patterns that way, mm-hmm. and the doctors want to know this information.
Yeah, so they ask questions and she can go right to the journal and give them exactly the answer.
Wow.
He's a great patient. He does what he's supposed to do. He's got a good attitude, a very positive attitude. It really helps. I can't imagine what it would be like to have someone who's just, as you could easily be, thoroughly depressed with this disease.
As could his carer be depressed by having to deal with it.
Yeah. I have a great support network.
Yeah. So she ditched me for about a week. And she went to, where did you go that time? You took off.
I went to see our daughter.
Yeah. But she lined up help to stand in. They worked out fine. But Sally's my preferred carer.
I think she's the McDreamy, Philip.
She is. She's my McDreamy.
Oh, no, this is getting really ridiculous.
So, Sally, glad to hear that you went to see your daughter. And how else do you take care of yourself?
I have a group of women I walk with every morning at 6:45 a.m. So that's really good. All my sisters live locally, and so I spend a lot of time with my sisters. And we just have a great group of friends that go back to uni days. 40, 50 years. And many of them live locally. And so I get out and do things like that. So I'm lucky. I'm very lucky.
And Philip, how do you take care of yourself aside from healthcare stuff?
Yeah, so I don't have a lot to report there because I have good days and lousy days. A lousy day would be the day after a night of TPN where I got terrible sleep, and sometimes it seems there's inflammation involved with being on it. Neuropathy would be worse. And then good days, I really enjoy getting together with some of our friends, even if it's just for a quick lunch. I do wear out pretty easily. So like one event a day is about the most I can do. I just run out of steam.
Yeah.
So social connection has been really important to both of you.
Very.
I would say so, yeah.
It's very important, very life-saving and life-affirming. We're lucky. We say it all the time, we're lucky. It could be so much worse. There you go. We have great insurance, so it covers all of this stuff.
Yeah. We had a situation where the first med I was on that for a year, and then I get a letter. My insurance said, we're not going to pay for this anymore. You're going to have to make other arrangements. And so for me, the other arrangements is getting back to, what my GP said initially is make your final arrangements. The hospital called and said, we understand your insurance isn't going to pay, but we're going to have you sign an IOU for the cost. That's fine. Oh, but how much will it be? $1.547 million.
Oh, goodness.
We were spiraling.
Yeah,
we were spiraling. In the end, it all got worked out. My team, they went into high gear and challenged the insurance company, and they appealed it and reversed their decision, and they continued to cover it. But it was a moment there where, geez, are we going to be able to keep taking this path?
Oh, boy.
It was a moment we didn't need.
Yeah.
Philip and Sally, thank you so much. Your story had lots of scary moments and also good moments, like being embraced by healthcare providers who understood amyloidosis and ATTR.
It's been really wonderful. Enjoy hearing your story.
Thank you.
Your story is going to be very helpful both to folks living with ATTR or other conditions, the importance of not giving up and holding on to hope, and how a good marriage is probably the best medicine anyone has ever invented.
Well, thank you for having us.
Yep, thank you.
My wife is going to have to give me points for saying that. I'm going to make sure she hears that.
What a fun couple Philip and Sally are. Not only did we learn a lot about ATTR, but we learned a lot about love and commitment and partnership and marriage.
Yeah, I think in the end, couples who are living with rare diseases and long-term health conditions, they're couples first. And it was really clear that Philip and Sally work together and work really well together. And it takes a lot of work because of his digestive problems. He gets his nutrition intravenously, and that's a lot for both of them. It's a lot for Philip to have the IV in 3 times a week for 12 hours, and it's a lot for Sally, who sets up the IV for him. And each time there's a risk of infection. So it's not only about being a caregiver, but it's about being as careful as possible.
Yeah, she's being an emotional support partner for him as he's had to learn how to deal with these evolving changes and challenges. But to your point, David, she's also had to learn a lot about medical care.
Their comments about medical care and the process of the diagnosis were also very interesting. And some of the names that they called the healthcare providers, like
the infamous Dr. Potato, yes.
The doctor who suggests that he eats potatoes. The other thing that I guess I was really touched by was the generational nature of the inherited variant for amyloidosis, and that after Philip was diagnosed, he contacted his sister, and she also carries the mutation. And then going back, he realized that his mother died of heart failure, most likely due to amyloidosis, as well as his uncle. So this is a condition that is generational and really causes loss over time, over multiple generations. It's something to really remember.
Fortunately, we learned from Dr. Castagna that because of diagnostic procedures and because of treatment options, people are often getting a diagnosis much earlier, which hopefully means improved quality of life for those who are affected.
And hope for those families.
And hope for those families.
One other point I'd like to make, I guess I'm speaking as a psychologist. It's always concerning to me when someone with a medical condition is sent to a psychiatrist because the healthcare providers are not able to understand what is causing the symptoms. And it does happen that people have symptoms that are like medical illnesses that may be related to a mental health condition, but it's pretty rare, and you really need to truly rule out the physical cause of illness before going there.
Thank you, David, for another really enjoyable podcast together. And thanks to Sally and Philip for helping us to better understand what it's like to live with ATTR. Thanks to our exceptional producer, Amy Brooks. And if you like this podcast, please subscribe and write to us at onrare@bridgebio.com with any questions or comments.
If you'd like to find out more about ATTR amyloidosis and perhaps get involved, here are some of the resources that you may want to contact: the Amyloidosis Foundation, amyloidosis support groups, Mackenzie's Mission, the Amyloidosis Army, and the Amyloidosis Research Consortium.
And thanks for being with us today. We look forward to you joining us for another conversation on Rare.